What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the neighborhood, and thank you for spending part of your day with us today. If you're a returning listener, or if this is your first time here, thank you so much for listening. On this episode, we're going to be discussing gaming subscriptions and the bleak and depressing digital future. Welcome to the podcast where two longtime friends and sometimes a guest talk about their favorite games from the perspective of an average player. My name is Andrew Kimball.
And I'm Dylan Wren, and we are your friendly neighborhood gamers.
So Dylan, you and I were kicking around some different topics we could bring up on the show for some of our broader discussion episodes. And this was one that you, I think, threw into the mix. So why don't you kind of give us the top overview of what we're going to be discussing on this episode?
Sure. So recently, both, I guess, over the past few years and recently within the past couple months, there's been a lot of talk about gaming subscription services. I think just a lot of talk about subscriptions in general, as we're, kind of seeing more and more things become a subscription. Netflix, Disney Plus, all of those going up on their prices, etc. The crackdown on password sharing. So there's been a lot of developments in sort of the subscription space. And so I just heard, some talk about subscriptions and seen some articles and stuff about like video game subscriptions just sort of floating around. Recently, they're like the whole Activision Blizzard Microsoft deal. I think that was a part of some of the holdup there for them, was they were trying to argue like the like overseeing bodies or whatever were trying to argue like, okay, well, this is basically like this subscription streaming service. Like, you can't, like, I think it was Europe was like, if we let you buy this, then you have to like let Ubisoft have your streaming rights or whatever for like the subscription stuff. So like that has been happening. They also recently, like Ubisoft's CEO has made some statements about like people need to get comfortable with not owning your own games. And Larian Studios, the makers of Baldur's Gate 3, have kind of fired back on that of like subscriptions are not, like, if that becomes sort of the dominant way that games are coming out, then people are sort of like picking and choosing. A select group of people are picking and choosing what gets made, what makes it to the market, what doesn't. And so like that's not a good future. And so I think it's something that we've kind of like kicked back and forth a few times as well, of just kind of like, yeah, the game subscriptions, we kind of have the running joke of like Gamepass is the best deal in gaming, etc. I thought it'd be an interesting topic to kind of dive into a little bit and chit chat about and just kind of see like what we had been hearing, what some of the people in the industry were saying, and kind of thoughts. Just an interesting discussion that we would probably have in any way. And so why not record it, which is the spirit of the show, really.
I have a couple like directions I guess I could go from what you were just saying there. I think I'll go with the Larian comment because the my other thought will probably come up again at some point in this conversation. But I find that such an interesting thing to say because I understand what they mean and the spirit of that comment. But isn't it also true that there are games sharing a platform with bigger games that wouldn't necessarily be doing that? Like, I guess on Game Pass, you can access some massive AAA titles like Halo or the Gears games, or like Lies of P is kind of that middle ground. But then there's also games on there that like I had never heard of before it popped up on Game Pass. Like, crap, what is the name of that? Like blasphemous inspired kind of 2D game that I did a review for on our YouTube channel.
Oh,
I cannot remember. I can picture it. It's very like black and white. The protagonist has white hair. Moonscars.
That one. Yep.
Yeah, so like I had never heard of Moonscars, didn't know anything about it, saw it pop up on Game Pass one day and was like, you know what? I'm going to give that game a shot. And I don't think I beat it, but I got like 3/4 of the way through. Like I was close to the end when I finally, like maybe something else came out that pulled me away. But I can see the argument. I guess what I'm trying to get at is I can see the argument coming from the other direction as, well, this is kind of like an equal platform and a method for some of these smaller titles to get to establish a player base and a fandom that they maybe wouldn't have if they were just trying to like put their game on Steam and hope for the best, you know?
Yeah. And I think like if you dive into the broader like quote with context, I think his state, like obviously the headlines and stuff are only going to pick and choose like the inflammatory part of it. Because he definitely did say that, let me find it here. You're not going to find Larian games on a subscription service, even if he respects that for many developers, it presents an opportunity to make their game. And I don't have an issue with that. I just want to make sure that the other ecosystem doesn't die because it's valuable. And so he's more so saying like, he doesn't want a future where streaming is the only way that people play games, I guess. It's more so a like, he wants, like, there are plenty of people who he thinks like, oh, good, streaming is a great thing for you. But others that are like, if you can create a big content rich game and you have the ability to just give that directly to the players, it sounds like that's the way he wants to, like, he doesn't want that to go away, which, you know, Larian is in kind of a weird spot in the industry, I think, anyway. I kind of bundle them with like From Software, which like if From Software wanted to just do whatever, like I think Namco still publishes for them, but they could just sell it directly to consumers if they felt like it, you know. And I think Larian, like if you dig into the history of Larian Studios, they were forced to release some bad games back in the day because of pressures from like publishers. And so I think he's wanting to not do that ever again. But it is an interesting, you know, I think you bring up a good point of, you know, like there are a lot of games that we may not have tried that, like Cocoon, which I also did a review on. I would never have picked up Cocoon if it had not been on Game Pass.
Yeah.
Especially knowing that it's like a 3 or 4 hour game that was running like $15. Like that's just not something for me personally. It's like a play it once and you're done. Play it in a single sitting. I'm like, I don't know if I like, to me, I don't feel like that would have been worth my $15. But if I'm paying $15 a month on Game Pass, I played Cocoon, and then I also played something else that was on Game Pass that month, I'm sure, you know? And so it was kind of like I got something for free. There was some sort of like discussion as I was kind of doing some research for some of this that was talking a little bit, though, about like up to a certain point, having your game on a subscription service is beneficial, because I think of that piece where it's like a lot of people would not have played your game if it was just thrown out there amongst 15 other games on Steam. But because it's on Game Pass, a lot of people played your game, and maybe when it leaves Steam Pass, they'll buy it so they can continue to have it. But I do wonder how that impacts like sales down the road, you know? I think we were talking about it where it was like Plague Tale. the other night we were talking about Plague Tale, and it's like, okay, we both really like Plague Tale. We probably would have bought Requiem when it came out.
Yeah.
But it was on Game Pass. And I still don't own Plague Tale Innocence, even though I keep thinking like, oh, I need to buy that game because I do enjoy it. But I still haven't because I played it on Game Pass, and I'm like, well, am I going to go back and actually play it? I'm not going to buy it full price, so I'm going to get it on sale. You know, like sort of that conversation. I do wonder how that impacts studios and publishers and developers and stuff, you know?
I wonder how it compares to games like publishers really push pre-orders, right? They want to make a bunch of money before the game's even out, and then they really want you to buy it at launch. But I wonder how many casual gamers get their games on sale or used at GameStop is starting to go away, but that was a big thing for a long time. But at the very least on sale. So like comparing, like, yes, I would have bought Requiem day one if it was not on Game Pass, but am I the majority? No. I know that because nobody's played that game. So it's like the people that would play that game, if they were to build a fan base without being on Game Pass, would the majority of people that buy their game be like a few years down the road as it's in sales and stuff? Like,
True.
I feel like that's a wrinkle that doesn't really come up a lot when this conversation is brought up.
Yeah, because there was like an article that I was reading about, I think it was the developers of Oddworld something, Oddworld.
Like Soulstorm.
Yeah. And they were basically like saying that they had, it was on like PS Plus during its launch month. And they were saying like they thought it was a good deal, but then like they projected that they were going to sell more copies of the game than they actually did then. And they basically sounded like they were blaming PS Plus giving away the game as like the issue that happened. Because it was just giving away the PS5 game, and I guess they were expecting a lot of people who had a PS4 but not a PS5 and had PS Plus to buy the game on PlayStation 4. And people didn't do that, which makes sense because I've definitely redeemed a bunch of PS5 games for a system that I don't have, because one day I probably will, and I will get to them maybe then, you know? I think I did it with this game, honestly, but, you know, it is like, so there was like that article on the one hand, and then on the other hand, there was an article about like Xbox kind of reporting that like, because they're definitely like the one that I look at as probably the ones that are having the most impact here, just because of the way they do Game Pass. I think I think PS Plus technically has more people subscribed to it, but also I don't know if they differentiate between like the various levels of PS Plus and stuff. But basically they were saying like there is like an effect that Game Pass has, like it does cannibalize sales a little bit. But back in 2018, they were reporting that like it sparks some, you know, full game sales. If your game has microtransactions and stuff, like people are way more likely to spend on that if they didn't have to buy the game full. And then they've reported that people who are on Game Pass, you know, buy more games, play more games, spend more on games, boost the sales of games that are on Game Pass. So like Xbox is putting this out there as like, no, we really haven't seen that it's causing issues for most people. This one developer is saying, well, it caused issues for us. So somewhere in between, there's probably the truth. I'm sure it's tough to measure exactly, but it is an interesting, like, to me, it seems like a smaller game definitely benefits from being on Game Pass, because it's getting, like, you're probably getting a nice lump sum up front, and you're getting your stuff in front of way more eyes than we're going to see it. Something like Elden Ring, I don't think benefits from being on Game Pass, because they're going to sell copies regardless. And I think that's that kind of touches a little bit on like PlayStation's subscription. Like Microsoft is very much like anything that comes first party day one on Game Pass, whereas PlayStation is very much like, no, our stuff will never be on PS Plus day one because we think that you should buy them full price because they're worth it.
Yeah, unless it's like Stray or like Oddworld, like you're talking about, some of these smaller titles have been launch games, but
yeah. And I think that kind of, shows a difference in, I guess, the way that they're thinking. Like Microsoft wants you to subscribe to their service, so of course they're going to put the big stuff out there. But if you're like a third party publisher, I don't think you would benefit from having your thing there day one, unless it's like a smaller experience, Yeah,
because you look at like the Ubisoft titles, and we have all the modern Assassin's Creeds on there now, but Valhalla came out in 2020.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's been a while that it took to come to the service.
Yeah. Now, funny you should bring up Ubisoft. I do think their first quadruple A game, Skull and Bones, probably should have come to Game Pass day one, because my God, that game is not setting the world on fire. But
yeah,
like when, and well, honestly, maybe Assassin's Creed, whatever the one is, the new one, maybe that could have come day one.
Yeah, I'm curious how that one sold. I feel like it probably sold just fine, and off the name alone. Something you mentioned like just a minute ago about like smaller titles doing better, that ties into some comments that like I've heard, and I could see being the case like eventually, where once subscriptions are the dominant like kind of way to access your games, are we going to start seeing either smaller in scope or just put it out there because it's going on a subscription service anyway type of like games being made just to fill? And I think about the TV side of things, where on the one hand you see a lot of garbage on these streaming services.
Yeah.
But you also get your like Stranger Things and Orange is the New Black and, some of these original shows that were made specifically for these streaming services that are, they were really well done. They were really good shows. So I don't see that like if it follows a similar trajectory, I could see that there always being like high quality stuff on these services. But again, if everything is going from a service or going to a service, and the developers are now pitching their IP or their idea to a kind of a deal made with the subscription provider, as opposed to, okay, how many of these do we think we can sell to gamers? It definitely does kind of change the dynamic and the goals when you're making your product.
Yeah, like if you're an indie studio now, you can generally you can still make your game, put it out there, get it on Steam, Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, whatever. No issues. I do see sort of the idea that it's like, okay, if pretty much everybody is not really purchasing purchasing games anymore, physically, digitally, whatever, and they're all just doing the subscription, if my game's not on the subscription, am I going to sell it? And the alarmists are, obviously being like, this is terrible for gaming, it's going to hurt gaming, blah, blah, blah. I'm kind of the opinion, and I kind of think this is what the Larian guy was saying, is that like if you have a good game with content, there will always be the market for that. You're not, even if like Xbox and PlayStation subscriptions become the main way people are, getting those games, it's not like the PC market doesn't exist,
Right.
The PC market is still, I think, the biggest gaming market outside of mobile or whatever. But like you can still, like, as I was putting all of this together, I was like, it's almost kind of weird Steam doesn't have like a subscription service at this point. I mean, like, what I know about Steam leads me to believe that they never would. But
right.
It was an interesting, like, yeah, so even if these alarmists that are all doom and gloom and are saying like, oh, this is going to destroy gaming, I'm like, PC gaming still exists. You can still be an indie developer and get your thing out on Steam. And like, obviously that's still hard. Obviously you're still competing with everything else on Steam. But if you make a good game with content, like, I don't think it's going to just like get passed up outside of just sheer bad luck, you know?
Right. Speaking of making a good game with good content, I saw a TikTok from our friends, the Wait For It podcast, where Eric was talking about how Palworld and Helldivers are like crushing it right now, being cheaper titles with smaller like advertising budgets and everything else, whereas Skull and Bones and Suicide Squad are both like kind of industry flops with huge marketing budgets and the games as a service model. And on top of their $70 price tag, but just like having that loop that a lot of gamers just don't find fun. And so that's not really related, I guess, to subscriptions, but always kind of at the core of the success of this industry is developers making games that gamers want to play.
Yeah. Well, and I think it is a little bit related because, like, I think that's been a little bit of sort of that more drive to the games as a service model is because you get your thing on a subscription service, you have new content every 3 months, you have new cosmetics every week, you have, you know, whatever. Like, they got the game for free, so they're going to be more likely to buy the stuff. So I do think the subscription idea has driven a little bit of that. You know,
because those games still want to be their own subscription. Like Suicide Squad wants to be your subscription. You buy it for $70 and then you keep paying on it as you play it because you love it so much. Because it worked for Fortnite and Destiny and some of these others, which Fortnite's free to play. But like now every game is chasing that model, hoping to be the only game you play. But it just doesn't work for most of them.
Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head too, kind of mentioning like these games that have a really fun loop and experience, and the experience of playing like Helldivers 2, people are really enjoying versus the loop of Suicide Squad. Like a lot of the games as a service games feel very samey, for lack of a better word, and it's just kind of like, oh, okay, well I've done this. It hasn't had the Batman villain skin on it before, but like I've done this, or it hasn't had the pirate skin from 2007 or whatever it was that but you know, it is an interesting like idea that some of these bigger budget titles are just not really grabbing gamers like the industry thinks they should, or at least publishers think they should.
Yeah, like they hope that they will.
And I think that's part of the, you know, the draw of those subscription services too, is like you mentioned TV. You've got to have your Stranger Things. You've got to have your Orange is the New Black. You've got to have your Game of Thrones for me to like subscribe to HBO. Like I'm not subscribed to HBO because I just really love all of the garbage that they've added from like HGTV that is now on that service. Like that's not why I subscribe to that. I subscribe for like the good shows. And so you've got to have good games. And if you keep going down this like games as a service, like samey, safe thing, you don't have those hits, you know?
Well, and
you have a Madam Web.
As a gamer, the best feeling in the world is being surprised by a game, like, or you know, having high expectations, I guess, and having them met, like in your case of your Elden Rings or whatever. But like when I think back to like why I love Bloodborne, why I love The Witcher, why I love Plague Tale is, if you boiled it down, the gameplay is pretty similar to The Last of Us, but everything else about that game and the fact that I had like no expectations really going into it.
Yeah.
It was a really special experience. And I think a lot of people are having that with Helldivers, where it was like, oh, this looks like it could be kind of fun. And then they get into it and it surprised them how much they love it. And when you are watching a game or an IP or a series that you used to love be stuck in development hell for like 7 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And then what finally gets regurgitated out is a heartless shell of what it once was. Yeah, that's not going to click with gamers.
Yeah. Because, I mean, like, and that, I guess, ties into some of the whole, like, video games are art sort of thing. Like, you can tell when it's just, like, a corporate, like, art thing.
Yes.
Like, when there's
one of my biggest complaints with Mirage.
Yeah. Like, it is literally just like, well, this is what it needs to have according to, like, the metrics and what we know the surveys say or blah, blah, blah. And, like, 100%, that's not to say, like, that stuff can't be useful, but you have to have, like, that passion and that, like, drive. And I don't know, like, you can't just, if the goal of the game is only to make money, then it's not gonna stick its landing. And I know that there are a lot of developers who obviously are very passionate about the things that they are doing, but a lot of the higher ups making the decisions are just like, well, we're just trying to make a profit with this game, so how can we like make a game where we can sell you 15 different Harley Quinn skins
easily,
so that and it's just like, well, okay, that's not really what we as gamers are looking for, you know? Like, we want a good story with fun gameplay, and if it can't hit those, then why am I going to spend $30 on a Harley Quinn like lingerie outfit? I'm not. So
well, yeah, no, the other thing is just like, I mean, the games that are successful in that model, if you look at them, have just a really solid core loop behind them. You look at Destiny with Bungie, and it's like, yeah, that game feels great to play. You look at Call of Duty even, and it's like the reason that game is so popular is because we all like started playing it at that time in our lives where like nostalgia was being imprinted at like the most intense levels it was ever going to be imprinted on us. And so a lot of people just like can't let that go. But also it's a really fun video game, like just the shooting and action of it. And it's been refined over years. And when they do something like they did with the campaign this time, like you do hear about it. The problem is like people are just addicted to that loop and they keep buying it anyways and complaining.
Well, and I mean, like, just statistically, how many people play the campaign of Call of Duty, you know? Like,
right.
100% there are people that do, I know that, but I don't think I've played a Call of Duty campaign since Black Ops 2. So, yeah. I think every Call of Duty I've gotten since Black Ops 2 has just been like, I am getting this for the zombies in the multiplayer, and that's it. So, you know. And I think, again, that speaks to the game is fun.
Right.
Like, it has fun gameplay. Like, I don't even care if some of them were mediocre campaigns because the gameplay is fun. Now, in my old age, I can't keep up with the children that are, tough. Constantly killing me in that game, so I don't play it anymore. But not because it's not fun. It's just the other people part of it I don't like.
So I made the joke at the beginning of this about, talking about the bleak and depressing digital future. And maybe it's because we're so ingrained and embedded, but like this is kind of the other thought that I had when you were kicking this episode off. But like, did people act like this when TV and movies went to streaming and we just weren't aware of it? Or are we just so embedded in gaming culture that we get an intense dose of it and it's really not that loud to the mainstream? Because I remember, granted, I was much younger and had way different like thoughts and priorities and everything else. But like the idea that I could just hop into a show and watch a whole season of it with no commercials, and all I had to do was pay a like monthly subscription. I thought that was great. I didn't really care about not owning that show because you know what? TV shows were ridiculously expensive to buy seasons of.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know because like obviously I don't remember hearing it, but also when that transition started, I was a lot younger, you know, and so maybe I just wasn't, and the internet was still a lot newer, like because we're talking what, like 2004, 2005, 2006 when that's happening.
Yeah. I mean, Netflix was around way back then. I can't quite remember when the like mailing stopped and the
I think the streaming started either right before or right after I went to college. So like 2009-ish. Because
I've been at college for a long time.
I know. Too long. But so like maybe I like the internet was still a whole lot newer back then, you know, like
right.
was Twitter even around at that point? I don't know. When did Twitter launch?
It had to be somewhere in that, like, you know, when Facebook and Twitter and all that was kind of in the same, but yeah, it was definitely not what it is now.
So, you know, I feel like a lot of the sort of the apocalypse of gaming is coming because digital, blah, 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 no more physical. Like, I feel like a lot of that is happening on like Reddit and on like Twitter and on or X. Or you know, that kind of thing. And so maybe some of it just wasn't around. Maybe we just weren't in tune with the TV show movie side of things. On the one hand, I definitely am like, yeah, I'm in the same boat as you where I'm just like, yeah, no, it's awesome that there's like a cheap subscription relatively that we can use to, you know, watch TV shows whenever we want, watch movies whenever we want. On the other side of things, on HBO, for example, Westworld is no longer available on HBO. Like, you cannot watch Westworld. And I don't know if they sell it. And so, like, that show is, like, inaccessible if you didn't buy it back in the day. And you're, like, obviously you can still pirate it. But they, like, took it. I forget why. I don't know why they took it off of HBO. But it was like an HBO original show. It ran for like 3 or 4 seasons.
Yeah.
And I went to go watch it. I had watched like the first 2 seasons and then like never like tuned in for the third one. And so I went to look for it the other day because I was like, oh, maybe I'm going to like sit down and like rewatch Westworld and like watch it through to the end this time. And it was not there, and I looked it up and it was like, it's gone. It's been removed. Like, the only way to get it is if you can find it in a store or you pirate it. And I was like, interesting. So like on that side of things, I'm like, okay, I to an extent I get the sort of like, I like to have a thing because who knows when it's going to go away. You know, some of the movies that like we have Disney Plus. If all of the sudden they decided to take all of the Star Wars movies off of Disney Plus for some reason, it's like, well, I'm glad that I own those because now I can still watch them whenever I want to. So like I get that side of it, but I also feel like I'm way more likely to rewatch a movie or a TV show than I am to replay a video game that I've already played. The games that I replay are few and far between, you know?
Right.
Like I'll probably continuously replay Baldur's Gate. I always go back to like the From Software games. I'll hop into like Battlefront 2. I'll hop into, you know, some older, like some other older games. But there's a lot of games where it's like I play through it and I'm like, okay, like I'm done. I'm not going to go back and replay that game. And I like the idea of having it because I have that option. But also I've been purchasing games digitally pretty much since it's been a thing. And when you purchase digitally, there's always kind of the like, we can revoke your right to like have this game, you know?
Yeah, that would be much more of like a, like there could be, I mean, technically you probably signed something when you bought it or whatever, but if they like started pulling people's libraries, that would be a much bigger problem than them taking something off of their subscription service.
Yeah.
Which is something that I was gonna mention, and then you talked about the Westworld thing, which is already kind of like a counter to what I was gonna say, but it's like, even today in the TV space, in the movie space where this has been happening for however long, I can still go to Amazon, I can still go to Walmart, I can go to any website, I can order a physical copy of my movie if I want to. That's still an option.
Yeah.
Or I can do what my wife and I have recently been doing. We watched through all the Hunger Games movies and we rented them from Amazon. Like, obviously renting is not really an option in the gaming space, but like, you'll always kind of have that digital purchase option.
Let me tell you about a little pitch that Microsoft and my boy had for the Xbox One. Andrew, let me tell you, you could sell your digital game to other people. You could rent your digital game directly from the storefront. You could lend your digital game to a friend over the internet. And the gamers ruined it, Andrew. The gamers ruined it.
Yeah, those gamers.
I feel like a lot of the issues that we are now running into with digital ownership and with like subscriptions and stuff were things Microsoft was trying to solve back when they pitched the Xbox One that people lost their minds over back then, because that would have fixed so many things. Everything people are complaining about, like, oh, I can't sell my game back. Well, you could have. You just didn't want to.
The aftermarket, like being able to recoup some of your costs or whatever. Yeah, that's a big thing that you can't really do with subscriptions. It's not as much of a hurt, but with like buying digital games, yeah. But my point, I guess, that I was getting at was that if you look at how far movies have gone in that direction and where we're at with movies, but you still have the option, like you have the other options. They are not gone. They might be a little bit smaller than they were before. Maybe you have to look a little bit harder or order something from online if you want the physical version of this specific movie. But like, we recently switched cell phone providers and lost our Disney, Hulu, ESPN bundle thing that we were getting through Verizon. And I was like, you know what? I'm not resubbing to those. And, you know, there's like some movies and some shows and things that my daughter likes to watch that are on Disney. And I'm like, I can buy a physical DVD of like Frozen and the Pixar movies that she likes and whatever, and she can just watch them on a DVD, and that's a one-time cost. I'm not paying monthly for that. And then if like another Star Wars show comes out that I really want to see or whatever, I can sub for a month and cancel and do it that way. But it's like we're getting to the point with movie subscriptions, which it's already kind of this way with like the consoles and just their ridiculous online charges that it's like every little thing is nickel and diming us so much at this point that you really kind of have to start being choosy about what you want to consume, because eventually you're paying like a car note on just media that you can't even, unless it's all you do all the time, you can't even consume it all to justify paying for it.
Yeah, because that's the thing that I kept wondering as I was looking through all of this stuff, like pulling this together, was just like, are people really like that upset by gaming subscriptions, or is it just that everything has been turned into a subscription? We have lived through the beginnings of like Netflix and stuff. And like back then, it was awesome because it was like Netflix is an alternative to cable or whatever. But now it's like fragmented so much that if you want to have access to like all of the different movies and TV shows and stuff, you're basically paying for like 8-9 different subscriptions. And you're basically just paying for cable at that point, you know?
Yeah, and so many of them have ads now. It's like, you basically what was so good about streaming back in the day is just turned into cable again.
Exactly. And so, you know, it's one of those things where I look at like gaming subscriptions and I'm like, you know, right now I pay for, you know, Game Pass. I've got like my PS Plus is coming up on like another renewal, and I'm like, I don't know that I feel like renewing it for another year because I don't necessarily think I am getting my value out of it. And obviously I still like get Nintendo Online because it's $20 a year.
Yeah,
Like,
it's so cheap.
Like it's barely more than $1 a month. So it's hard to like say no to that one really. But like, Game Pass, it's like, doing the cost breakdown, it's like, okay, it's like $204 a year if you're doing Game Pass Ultimate. Like there are cheaper versions of it, but Ultimate comes bundled with like EA Play and whatever. And so it's basically like if you're going to buy 3 full priced games that come to Game Pass, it's worth it. And, there are usually 3 full priced games that I play on Game Pass a year, plus more. So like worth it in my mind. But like PlayStation, I have to look at and it's like, okay, that's $216 a year if you're paying for like the biggest one. I'm not playing 3 full priced Sony games a year. I'm just replaying Bloodborne. And I own that game physically, so I don't need to subscribe to have access to it, But I can definitely see like, okay, so we went from like Game Pass, PlayStation, Nintendo to then EA sort of broke off and did their own thing. And Ubisoft is doing their own thing, which they're charging $18 a month for. They are the most expensive gaming subscription service, and they're fucking Ubisoft. Like, come on. Get over yourselves. But also, like, you've got Amazon, you've got Apple Arcade, you've got the NVIDIA GeForce Now or whatever, you've got the Humble bundle or Humble monthly bundle or whatever it is. And there's probably some more that I forgot. Like, if you're starting to do like all of those, it's like, yeah, you might as well just buy single games at that point, like, geez, be cheaper. Because, yeah, I think but I think people are getting burned out with just everything being a subscription for sure.
Right. Yeah. Well, and right now the value is hard to argue with for Game Pass, especially when Game Pass was the only one. It was like, why would I at the time not pay $15 a month to have access to this full library of games that I can just like download and play whenever I want? But the prices have started to creep up. There's the confusing tiers starting to creep in. Now PlayStation, like now other people are joining, and now all of a sudden you've doubled that cost if you want it for 2 consoles. And there's that kind of always ever looming threat in the back of your mind of, if they don't want to raise the price, like what is the ad equivalent? That like it's easy to put ads in our TV shows because they've been doing it for years. But like in our games, what is it going to be every game has microtransactions? Is it going to be actual ads in the games? Like you watch an ad before you load it up, or is it going to be like more subtle ad placement things? There's the kind of potential.
Like,
yeah, there's the potential for it to go horribly wrong at some point, and I think that's what a lot of people are like concerned about. And we joke about Phil being like the dad to the gamers and like one of us, but ultimately Microsoft wants to make money. Xbox wants to make money, and right now playing the good guy gamer friendly company is working for them, and hopefully it continues to and they stick with it. But like there could be a very possible scenario where it just goes like full, you have ads, whatever, like however they decide to monetize it. Or like we talked about earlier, the games just get cheapened down to such a level that they can say, look how many games we have, but only like 2 of them are worth playing. We're not there yet, and hopefully we won't be, but like there are some realities down the road where it just it'll be kind of like me right now with TV subscriptions. I'm like, I don't need all the crap. I can buy the like 3 movies that my daughter wants to watch.
Exactly. And I think, I think 100% you're right. Even if, number one, I think it's important to remember that all of these are corporations that are not on your side. They view you as a wallet that they are going to take money out of.
Exactly.
And so heavily aligning yourself with any faction that is a corporation is you're not winning. You're just like defending somebody who you're paying for the privilege of defending. So like,
unless it's Nintendo,
which like Nintendo is weird.
No,
So
I'm just kidding.
I mean, they out of all of them probably are the one I would say is most like that. You know, they're the ones where their CEO takes a pay cut when the
Right.
Wii U bombs, but they're still a corporation. So there's that. But also, like, even if Phil Spencer like manages to like kind of keep the sort of like good guy Xbox thing going, he's gonna retire at some point, you know, like, and they're gonna bring somebody new in, and is that new person gonna be, oh, I'm just a gamer who happened to like get to work at Xbox? Or is it going to be, you know, like, I hate video games, I'm just here to make money, you know? And so there's that. I think there's also, like, we've been seeing sort of that slowdown, that stagnation of subscriptions just across the board, like not even just in the gaming space, but just across the board where people are tired of it. I saw, like, as I was putting this together, like the newer cars, like some of the smart cars and like very like not ones that I have, but it's like, oh, do you want your seat warmers to work? Like, pay the subscription to Mercedes, you know? And so it's just kind of like, no, like we are not, like, things are expensive, and this is ultimately entertainment. And so at a certain point, if it hits where, you know, we're just being nickeled and dimed constantly and there's nothing worth it, hopefully we would vote with our wallets and just not buy it. And like, if you're super against subscriptions, don't get one. But that's the other thing. As I was looking at all of this, subscriptions make up 8% of total spending on like video games. I saw that stat somewhere. I can't remember where, but it was like, it's not a huge part of it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
People still spend way more money on video games outside of subscriptions, so obviously they want these subscriptions to take off, because in their mind that gets you into their ecosystem, which then gets them a cut of every, like, they want you to get on a subscription so that when you make these purchases, you're purchasing them on Xbox or on PlayStation, so that you are paying them their cut. They're like 30% cut of every purchase on the system, you know? So like, it's okay. Like, I don't even personally think subscriptions are taking over, you know? I think it's just a nice thing that complements all of the other games out there that are not on a subscription. I don't know.
Yeah. I think as long as we have options, like, I'm good. I think that the market has a way, it's kind of how it's always worked, it's how it's designed to work. When something swings one way, it's going to end up being corrected. And so when streaming services become the overwhelming force, like they're becoming on like the TV and movie side, you see people start to pick and choose or start to cancel and start to look for other options. And then that's when some new upstart in the market, some new Netflix comes out with some new business model that everybody says, you know what, we're going to do that instead. And then things start to shift another direction. And so I don't think we're ever going to reach the like dystopian apocalypse that gamers like to hope that we will, like secretly hope that we will, when it comes to digital gaming and subscriptions and things like that. It's like, we're going to be fine. The market's going to correct itself. Also, these are toys. These are forms of entertainment that we enjoy, like, playing with. And yes, when you have money tied up in it, you definitely want, like, I would hate if somebody came into my house and just like grabbed my consoles and my TV and walked away with them and was like, well, you didn't technically own these, so now I'm taking them back. Like, that would suck.
Yeah.
But that would also be like where lawsuits and things start happening. Like, that wouldn't happen on a mass scale without any sort of like repercussions. So I think like that go ahead.
Yeah, like I was gonna say, the scenario people who like who advocate for physical media like to throw out there is like, oh, well, technically you don't own anything on like your Xbox account. Like, if you have digital stuff, it's all just like licenses that let you play it. They can take those away at any time. And I'm like, Yeah, but like the scenario where they take that away is like you've done something terrible that breaks like Xbox terms of service and they have like just straight up banned your account. Or you have like you were doing something horrible in an online game and you got permabanned, and so like all of the games in that, like, I don't know, like you were defrauding Ubisoft, and so Ubisoft pulled your license for all Ubisoft games, and so it's like, yeah, sorry about it, you messed up, like you did it and there are consequences to your actions, sorry about it. So
yeah, or we've just hit a point in society where like your video games aren't your biggest concern if things are like falling apart to the point where you're like digital libraries don't work anymore. And also that argument holds less and less water like the bigger games get, because nowadays your physical disc is just downloading a digital code anyways. So it's like, yes, you technically own the physical thing, but if you don't have internet or whatever to like,
which is a whole other
download and download like the big patch that it needs to actually work, like, yeah, it's a separate conversation about just kind of
people freaking out about like, I hate always online games, like where are these gamers that are not online? Like I know that you play games solo by yourself, like technically I could play Baldur's Gate 3 not connected to the internet or whatever, but it's also like you're like not updating your games, you're not digitally buying them, you're not, like you said, if you're getting a physical disc you still have to install it, and so many games feature a multiplayer component anyway, or just better online features, that I'm kind of just like, I know that there are more people that own an Xbox that don't have internet than I think there are,
right?
But I still think that number is probably less than 5% of people who own an Xbox. So,
well, and those people are just sitting happily playing Skyrim for the 8th time in their room, not complaining on the internet that they don't have, because they don't have it. So
yeah, like there's a lot of just like gamers who are always online, as is evidenced by the fact that they're posting about it on Reddit and Twitter, that are getting upset for some imagined person who is not real. So
yeah, well, that's kind of like internet outcry in a nutshell.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, but what if somebody wants to play Diablo 4 not on the internet? Who? Where is this person? Produce them, please. They don't exist.
Bring them to me. Oh, man. Well, how do you want to land this plane?
I guess my question is, so like right now, you like Xbox Gamepass, greatest deal in gaming.
Yeah, best deal in gaming.
What price would make it not the best dealing? Like what per month would it have to get to? Because like you mentioned, like we're probably going to start seeing all of these subscriptions start going up, especially as they maybe try to start introducing like free tiers or ad-based tiers or something like that. What would like the premium tier for like Ultimate that we pay now have to get to per month for it to not be worth it?
As it is now, because the like unit of measurement that we kind of always use is like how many games am I playing on it, and if I were to buy these outright. And I think as long as it stays under that like $30 mark, kind of like I would be heavily considering letting it go if it was starting to creep that high. Anything beyond that, I'd probably have to say, because like there are some months I don't play a lot of Xbox. There are some months I don't play like Xbox. There's nothing that really interests me specifically comes to Game Pass or whatever. And so it's like, do I really want to drop that amount of money on something I'm not using? Whereas like, if I go a month where I don't really use it, but I just pay like the $15, $17, it's like, well, I would have to like not use it for a lot of consecutive months before it equals a brand new $70 game. So like I can kind of justify that. But like as that gap shrinks, that would be, but also like maybe there've been some headlines and stuff about game prices maybe going up again. So it's like if game prices are like $100, then a subscription really makes sense. But that's another conversation of like, eventually that bubble will have to pop too. Like, people are not going to pay that for a video game. So at least not the average person. Obviously, there are people out there right now trying to get the Elden Ring Collector's Edition that's going to be like $250. But that's not the people that these companies need to be profitable.
Yeah, because like everybody who is panicking about like, oh, like subscriptions, like the high price of games is one of the major factors driving these subscriptions, because when I can get access to hundreds of games for $17 a month and a new game costs $70, as long as I'm playing 3 new games a year, that subscription is way more worth it than not having. And so 100% I agree with you, where it's like, if it creeps up to like, now I've got to be playing like 10 new games a year, 6, 7 new games a year. It's like, okay, well, how many am I really playing? Am I really, especially, with Xbox. I mean, now with Activision and Blizzard and stuff too, it's like, okay, so if I play the new Call of Duty, if I play, the new this or that, if I play the new, like, so like Indiana Jones is coming, Hellblade is coming.
Right. Avowed
is coming. So those are 3 games this year that I'm already like, cool. Those are 3 games that I'm going to play. Those are 3 games that I'm not having to pay $70 for. And so these are 3 games that any additional stuff that I play on Game Pass, like Pal World, is basically free,
Right.
But like if it started creeping up where it's like, okay, I have to play. I also know that I'm going to play the new MLB The Show when it comes out in March.
Right.
And so that's another one that I'm like, okay, I'm not spending $70 on. But as it creeps up to like, okay, 6, 7, 8 games a year that are new that are coming to Game Pass that I've got to play, it's like, I don't know. Because especially too, when it's like, well, maybe if I wasn't putting that on Game Pass every month, I could, save up 8 months to buy a new Nintendo game. Like, because those will never go on sale.
Exactly. They're $5 off sometimes.
Sometimes. But yeah, it is an interesting thing, and I agree with you. I do think that bubble's got to burst, because it's just not like, this is a luxury item still. And obviously, like you said, there are people that are well able to afford the luxury item to the point where they're going to go buy the $300 Elden Ring stuff. But in a world where all of the other prices keep going up too, it's like, well, I'm not going to keep spending this amount of money when I need food, clothing, shelter, And I feel like they're going to hit that point where it's like, okay, we got to bring these prices down, or we got to, like, we can't go up to $80, $90, $100, because people just are straight up not going to purchase these games, So who knows? Maybe there's enough people putting them on credit cards and whatever that can't not get the newest game. But
yeah, and it's either going to be changed through like different monetization options, like we've seen with like free to play and stuff like that, or it's going to be a lot more like Hellblade and Miles Morales sized experiences. Like if they're that high produced, they're going to be like 8 hours, 10 hours long. Like you're going to start to see cutbacks. I mean, even Spider-Man 2, there was the whole internet nonsense about like, oh, you can beat the whole game in like 25, 30 hours. That makes it bad, which is like, I would much rather have that conversation about like cost and value and things like that, as opposed to just, what it was being used for, about, so Sony sucks because their game is short.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's the problem, is like, I would much rather have this kind of conversation where we talk about like, okay, but yeah, I mean, there is definitely a valid concern when you spend $70 plus tax and then the experience is only so long. But then it's like, how good was, like, I played Valhalla for 100 hours, but it wasn't nearly as fun as Spider-Man 2 was. So, there's just a lot when you talk about all of these subjective ideas that are in this industry that is all about these luxury entertainment toys that we all enjoy.
Exactly. So what's our takeaway here? Vote with your wallet. Stop freaking out. Don't get on Twitter or Reddit ever again. And these are toys, and corporations aren't your friend. So that pretty much sums up our conversation today, I think.
That's thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Yeah. No. Get all those things put on a t-shirt and
right. Yeah.
Wear it to like PAX or something.
Yes, the next Super Bracket Bros meetup.
There you go. Cool. Well, what do you got for housekeeping, Dylan? What's going on YouTube?
Okay, so last week we had a video on Final Fantasy VII Remake come out on YouTube. So if you want to check that out, go check that out. We're at about 450-ish subscribers, I think, on YouTube. So we are basically in that final stretch of getting to 500, which unlocks like stuff on the creator side for us. So if you are listening to this and you are not subscribed and you've listened to like an hour of us chit-chatting, it'd be cool of you to go over and subscribe if you're not, because clearly you got an hour's worth of entertainment. Surely that's worth like a click. Come on. A little click on that subscribe button.
Yeah.
But we also have a lot of other good stuff over there. Speaking of Game Pass, there's a couple of, like some of the games that we have talked about, Pal World, Cocoon, some of those things available on Game Pass. We've got some videos on if you want to check those out. If you want to check out our thoughts on why Ubisoft's $17, $18 a month subscription is not worth it, Andrew has a video about how Assassin's Creed Mirage is not worth it in general. So check that out too. And if you're a YouTube podcast listener, tell us in the comments why YouTube is your platform of choice for podcasts, please. Thank you.
Dylan really wants to know.
I do.
Let's see. Well, we mentioned that you should stay off of Reddit and Twitter. But if you want to keep up with us, Discord is the best place to do that if you want to have like actual conversations. I'm not opposed to it. We don't typically like get super deep. We're pretty lighthearted and fun in our Discord. But I wouldn't be opposed to having actual like nuanced conversations about things like this. And then if you enjoy this podcast and you have not yet, we would greatly appreciate a review if you can leave one on your platform of choice, or a 5-star rating. That helps us a ton in getting us into the algorithm and finding new listeners through those means. But that will do it for this episode. Thank you all so much for listening. We really appreciate it, and we will catch you on the next one. We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of the Friendly Neighborhood Gamers podcast. If so, we would greatly appreciate your help in growing the show and the community by giving us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any other podcasting app that allows it.
We also have some great videos on our YouTube channel, including reviews, rankings, and other topics. We would really appreciate you checking it out. And if you want to keep up with everything going on in the neighborhood, follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and feel free to jump in our Discord server.
We hope to see you there. Links for everything are in the podcast description. Thanks again for listening, and remember,
stay friendly, gamers.